I'm a small female living alone in a large city. Knowing exactly what this could mean for me, I'm pretty wary of my surroundings and the people in it. I recently moved to the back of an apartment complex, to the 3rd floor, which I was really excited about since I hate being on the ground level. A few days after moving in, I met my across-the-way neighbor, Steve. Steve was tall and skinny, with dark hair and the tryings of a beard. He was nice, polite in our few passings, but we never had more than an exchange of a few hellos. Until one Saturday night. My friend dropped me off at my place late that night, and I stumbled up the stairs, stupid drunk. I knew I was making a racket because Steve opened his door as I approached mine. I waved at him and smiled as I fumbled for my keys. I was facing my door, trying to remember which key it was as they all looked the same, and I felt Steve come up behind me. He grabbed my hand with the keys and breathed,
"Let me help,"
and immediately found the correct key and helped me to put it into the keyhole. It could have been romantic, looking back, if this guy hadn't proceeded to stick his nose into my hair and take a deep, shaky breath. The red alarm bells immediately started going off in my head and cut through my drunken stupor. My breath was frozen in my throat, and I realized just how fucked I could possibly be. Thanks," I mumbled before slipping through my door and locking it behind me. I stood there for a moment, going, "What the fuck?" when I heard a soft thump on the other side of the door. I slowly turned and looked through the peephole, but I couldn't see anything, only blackness, which didn't make any sense because there was a light outside which kept the staircase lit. I blinked and stepped back before checking again. This time, I saw Dave backing away from the peephole. My body felt like it was dunked in ice water. Steve went back into his apartment, and I didn't hear anything else that night. For a few weeks after that, I would hear the same soft thump and find Steve trying to peer into my apartment from the peephole. I could hear his heavy breathing. Sometimes he would even paw at the door, but he never came out when I would come home after the first time. I never called the cops. I probably should have, but Steve was my neighbor and I didn't want to stir up any animosity that I would have to deal with. Steve moved out 2 weeks ago. I want to preface this with the fact that I didn't get a good look at what we encountered. I saw a glimpse and I don't want to make any assumptions on what it may or may not have been. 2 of my friends and I used to be stationed at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. We decided a Memorial Day camping weekend would be a good idea, so we took a trip up to Monjo Peak, outside of Ruidoso, New Mexico. We planned to stay for 3 nights, the first 2 of which were very relaxing. On our first day there, when we were deciding where to set up our tent, we found loads of bones from various animals. Not mounded up or anything like they were collected, just bones all around the campsite. The campsite had 5 places to pitch tents over about 300 square meters. We decided to pitch our tents on the highest point at the campsite, about 30 or 40 feet higher elevation than the parking lot. On the 3rd night, it was well after sunset when all of the noise from the woods died out. I'm not sure how long it was silent before me and my friends broached the subject, but it wasn't long after that the hair on the back of my neck started to stand, followed by goosebumps all over. I could see my friends starting to get jittery, and from one of the other campsites, we heard their 2 dogs going absolutely apeshit. These were very relaxed and happy dogs for the last 2 days. We had also made decent acquaintances with the couple who had the dogs. They had lunch with us on day 2. The other 2 groups who were camping at the same time had gone silent as well. The car was about 60 meters from our campsite, and we unanimously decided to get our guns, AR-15s and 9mm pistols. On our way back, we started to smell a rotting, fetid stench. I don't know if anyone has ever had to burn feces before, but it smelled like that, mixed with death. It was cloying and felt like it was almost physical, it was so strong. We got back to our campsite and decided to post guard all through the night. 1 man up and 2 asleep, or at least resting. I volunteered for the first shift because I knew I wasn't getting any rest at all. We had plenty of firewood for the night, especially because we were leaving the next morning. I kept the fire blazing as much as I could, because I figured that if it was some sort of animal, it wouldn't be too interested in messing with me. I kept my back to the fire so I could maintain good night vision. The forest to the southwest of our camp was pretty burnt out, and from where we were set up, like I said before, there was an elevation change. Once you got into the tree line, it was very steep, not impassable by any means, but definitely not somewhere where you'd need to be walking at night. Behind the trees, I noticed a stark white shape. I shouldered my rifle and it didn't move at all. I assumed it was a partially hidden tree behind another one. I started scanning the tree line with a flashlight because I felt that the stench was stronger than it was before. As my beam passed over what I thought was the obscured tree, I saw an eye shine from the white shape. As soon as I registered what I was seeing, it disappeared behind the tree. I debated investigating, but instead just roused my friends, and we scanned together. When my shift ended, I took off my rainfly and my tent so I could see out if needed. I didn't see anything on my next shift, just the smell. In the morning, just before dawn broke, the smell seemed to recede, but only so much. Almost like it left a scent as a warning was the impression that I got. We broke camp and started packing up. About halfway through our breakdown, we saw the other 3 groups packing up as well. I went over and talked to the couple with the dogs, asking them if they saw anything last night, or if their dogs calmed down after the barking stopped. They told me that even when they stopped barking, the dogs didn't sleep. They spent the night whining and growling in the direction of the hill to the southwest. I started working at my current summer part-time job last spring. I'm situated in a large old building that used to be a country club, but fell into disrepair about 10 years ago. Although there's nothing paranormal about my story, it is maybe worth mentioning that the former manager committed suicide in the main office upstairs when they went out of business. It adds to the unsettling quality of this place. Along with that, so do the seemingly never-ending hallways and passages, innumerable hidey holes and half-empty pools, and other strange unused parts of the building like a secret shower room, sauna, and a tunnel of storage areas that connect the men's and the women's bathrooms. There are also a lot of doors to the outside in this place. It makes sense for a country club, but currently, we only use one small room for the golf course check-in, the kitchen, and one dining room for the restaurant upstairs, and the small cafe area for early morning golfers to get their coffee and beer. The cafe area is where I work. In the summer, we clock in to open the cafe before 6 a.m, often before the sun comes up. The golf course people come in pretty shortly after, but I would be the first person in the building every morning. I would unlock the front door, disarm the alarm, walk downstairs in the dark, unlock this cage that keeps the drunkies at the bar upstairs at night from wandering downstairs, and crawl along a long dark hallway with no windows to get to the light switch at the end of the hall. This always creeped me out, and I ended up holding my keys between my fingers like brass knuckles. I'm a woman in my mid-20s, and I've lived in plenty of bad neighborhoods. I would also ninja slide down the walls on the opposite side of whatever doorway is coming up, just because it's pitch black and I'm a scaredy bear. By the time I get to the end of the hall and flip the light on, my heart is always pounding out of my chest as I struggle to find the right key to let me into the cafe. The whole situation started when Tim, a golf course employee, mentioned that he kept shutting the door between the men's locker room, bathroom, and the storage area that leads to the women's, and every time he would go back in, there it would be open again. This, along with some strange noises, was fodder for the bar regulars upstairs to claim that this place was haunted by the old manager and whomever else they said died within these halls. Travis, a co-worker in the cafe, also mentioned that a few minutes after he opened, he went into the men's locker room and noticed that it was steamy and smelled like soap. So he went into the shower room to investigate, and everything was sopping wet and still hot. He was the only person who was supposed to be there at that time of the day, but didn't see anyone. So he let it go. A couple of months later, Tim noticed this weird side door that you had to climb up a rickety old staircase on the side of the building, and it wasn't shutting correctly. He fixed it, and it locked correctly, and didn't think anything more of it. Shortly after, someone from the golf course came over to tell me that they found someone's entire life packed away in one of their hundreds of lockers that no one uses, and they thought that someone was living in the storage room between the men's and the women's bathrooms. He must have been coming in before the golf course people set the alarms when they left in the evenings, and leaving after the cafe person, i.e. me, would come in and turn off the alarm in the morning. So that means that every morning, as I blindly shuffled my way down the long dark hallway alone, one of these pitch-black doorways actually did have someone hiding behind it. A few days later, a red-faced angry bald man in Vietnam-era army-issued glasses came into the cafe and started screaming, puffing and flailing his arms around, yelling about his stuff getting thrown out. He went over to berate the golf course people, so they asked him about the contents of the locker. His answers about specific items led them to realize that this was the man who was secretly living in one of this building's many dark passageways. I never found out much about him, whether he was dangerous or just homeless, but watching him scream about his stuff made it clear that he wasn't 100% rational. I still work there and do a darkness shuffle down the hallway every morning when I work, and although they say everything is on the up and up with the alarms and the doors locking, it still creeps me the hell out. I have always loved learning about the paranormal. Don't get me wrong, I don't really believe in it, but it entertains me. In fact, if it wasn't for this one experience, then I wouldn't even entertain the thought that the paranormal existed. I never believed in God, and have been an atheist for as long as I can remember. Ever since I was a kid, I have looked for the logic behind what people consider to be paranormal. It was a hobby for me, learning about the truth behind the myths. But one day, I had an experience that I just couldn't explain away. It's hard to explain away something that you see with your own eyes. I'm 22 now, and this happened when I was 15. And in the past 7 years, I've tried to find a reason, anything that could explain what I saw, but I haven't been able to explain it away. Maybe someone here that listens to this has had a similar experience and could find the truth behind what happened that day. Okay. This happened back in 2010. I was in the living room with my best friend and my nephew. My best friend, Chevo, was helping me babysit my 5-year-old nephew. We were playing a Dragon Ball video game, and my nephew was watching the action. To put it bluntly, I was getting destroyed. At around 6 in the afternoon, I had gotten tired of being beaten and ran to my room to get another video game. While I was looking for a game, I heard Chevo scream my name. Rick! When I heard him call out for me, I heard terror in his voice, and that chilled me to my core. Chevo was older than me, and the closest thing to a brother that I've ever had. I was a black belt, and he and I were constantly getting in trouble and fights at school. I had never seen him scared in all of those years that I knew him, so hearing his voice filled with fear frightened the hell out of me. My first thought was that something had happened to my nephew. I ran out of my room and ran down the hall towards the living room, when I saw it. There was a thing running towards me. I was about 5'5" at the time, and this thing was a foot shorter than me, but the sight of it terrified me. It looked like a kid, but it was all black. And no, I don't mean that it was African American. I mean that it literally was fully and completely black. It looked as though someone had fashioned a kid out of living shadows. He ran straight towards me, and I moved out of its way. And when he ran in front of me, I could see his features. Eyes, nose, ears, short black hair. Everything about him was black. He ran past me and straight down the hall, and I sprinted to the living room to make sure my nephew and my friend were safe. When I got there, I saw my best friend, white with fear, holding my nephew. He saw me and said, "Please, tell me you saw that." I nodded, and I could see the relief and fear in his face. I had seen the same thing that he had seen, so he hadn't imagined it. That was good, but it also meant that whatever that thing was, it was real. We turned on all the lights in the kitchen and the living room, and instructed my nephew, who was terrified of everything that was happening, to not leave the living room, while my best friend and I each grabbed a knife from the kitchen and began to walk down the hall towards the bathroom, which was down the hall where the thing was running to. to see if anything was there. We approached the bathroom, opened the door, and found nothing. We did the same thing to every room in the house, and found absolutely nothing. No windows were open, nothing was disturbed. We searched the apartment from top to bottom, but found nothing that could point us towards the shadow kid that we had seen. After having found nothing, we grabbed my nephew and barricaded ourselves in my bedroom until my parents arrived. When we were in there, I asked Sheva what had happened from his point of view. According to him, while I was in my bedroom looking for another game, he had continued to play against the machine when he noticed my nephew looking at something other than the TV. He turned and saw the kid just standing there in the living room, not talking, not moving, just standing there. The sight of it scared him, so he screamed my name. The moment he screamed my name, the thing bolted down the hall, where I had my run-in with it. Neither he or I could figure out how it got in or out of the apartment. It simply appeared and then vanished. The first one to see it was my nephew, but he was too young to clearly articulate what he had seen. All we had managed to get out of him was that he had noticed the kid standing there and was curious about who he was. It's been 7 years, and I still don't know what it was. I know I didn't hallucinate because 2 other people saw the same thing I did. I know it didn't come through the doors because everything was closed and locked, and I have no idea how it could have left without disturbing anything. This is my experience. I have no idea what it was, and I can't explain it away. Has anyone else read or seen anything similar to this before?